are so many different types of canvas for painters to choose from that it can be daunting sometimes, especially if you are a beginner at painting and you've never heard of a lot of the different options. So in this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know to choose the right canvas for painting. I'm going to show you canvas panels, all the different types of canvases back here that are pre-made, as well as discuss making your own stretch canvas. We're going to start by discussing the pre-made canvases. These are the ones that are already stretched for you. You'll find them at like Hobby Lobby, Michaels, Dick Blick online is one of my favorite places to purchase canvases. But they are widely available, lots of different places. But there are so many different things about the canvases that you need to consider so that way you can pick out the right canvas for you. One of the first things to consider is the thickness of the canvas. You can see this canvas up here, which is a value pack canvas from Michaels. It's one of the most affordable canvases you can get, is much thinner. It's like 7/8 inch thick, or maybe 3/4 of an inch thick, somewhere in that range. This one is 1.5 inches thick. This is a more expensive canvas. The 1.5 inch canvases would be considered a level 3 canvas at Michaels if you're shopping for them in store. But here's the thing, when you're thinking about thin canvas versus a thicker canvas, the thin canvas is going to warp more over time than the thicker canvas is. So that's why it's generally considered to be more professional if you paint on a thicker canvas. But here's one of the things I caution you about, especially when you first start painting. You need to practice a lot. So I would suggest going with the cheaper, thinner canvases because they are basically throwaway canvases. You can paint something on them. If it doesn't work out, just throw it away, or you can give it to a family member as a gift. Maybe donate it to Goodwill. But the main idea here is that you're not too worried about the cost of materials, because sometimes you are going to have really amazing paintings that'll just turn out right at the beginning. And then many other times, most often the case, your paintings will not turn out so well, especially for the first couple years of painting. And so this is why it's good to have really cheap canvases, and the Michaels value packs, things like that are great for practicing. And when you're ready to graduate up to a more professional level, then you can get the level 3 or the 1.5 inch thick canvases. Also, it's important to note that if you use one of the thinner, lower quality canvases, and it's one of those amazing paintings that turns out and you want to be able to sell it later and you don't want it to warp for customers, just frame it, because once you frame it, no one will be able to see that it was a thinner canvas and it won't warp over time, because framing it stops it from warping and fixes any warping that's on there. I've made a whole video about how to frame your canvases. You can find that in the description if you'd like to learn about that. Next, I'm going to discuss canvas panels, because panels are also really popular to paint on. When you're painting with a panel, you need to think about what you have to paint it on. So you need to have an easel that has a ridge right here that will lock the panel in place, so that way you can paint on it without it moving around. If you don't have an easel that has this little ridge or lip in it, then you need to be able to paint this laying flat. And they are very affordable, even more affordable if you buy the value packs of them like at Michaels or Dick Blick. They're even more affordable than canvases. But there are some downsides to the cheaper panels, and I'm going to go over that. Here is one of the panels I got from Dick Blick. It was in one of their value packs, and you can see it's kind of warped. And this was before I ever started painting on it. It came this way. And this is often the case with a lot of cheaper canvas panels. Just to show you, here is one of the abstract paintings I made on a panel, kind of a practice piece. You can see it's also warped. But the good news is that if you have a canvas panel and it warps, you can also frame it. And it's very easy to frame these. You can just get any frame off of the rack that has glass in it, remove the glass, shove this down in the frame, secure it inside, and it'll flatten it right out. But what if you want to paint on panels and you don't want them to warp? There are some panels, they are more expensive, not that much more expensive, but a little more expensive, and they will not warp as much as the cheaper canvas panels, because those ones I just showed you, the canvas is actually wrapped around some sort of a cardboard or chipboard material, and that is not going to really hold up well from a warping standpoint. But these panels here, these are ampersand panels, and you can get these at Michaels and Hobby Lobby, I believe both places now, but online as well on Dick Blick and on Amazon. These panels, they're on wood. And they have different levels of smoothness. This particular one is very, very smooth. So when you think about the texture on the surface of either a panel or a canvas, it's called tooth, and it's how much of the canvas texture is showing through. And different artists have different preferences for the amount of tooth on their substrate that they're painting on. Personally, I love the canvas texture and I want it to come through in my paintings, and it enhances the way that I'm applying the paint to the canvas and the amount of textures that I can create. But I know a lot of artists that absolutely can't stand this, and so what they will do is they will purchase a canvas and then they will gesso over a couple more layers on there, so that way it'll be a more smooth surface for them to be able to apply their paint. So it's very much up to you and your preferences as an artist. Do you want to paint on something that has the canvas texture showing through, or do you want it to be completely flat? And if you want it to be completely flat, then painting on a panel or a cradled panel that's made completely flat because it's just gessoed onto a board is definitely an option for this, because then you don't have to buy the canvases that are pre-made and then gesso over them a couple of times. And for me, I'm always about trying to save as much time as possible, and getting the substrate I'm painting on all ready to go, pre-made, saves lots of time. But that transitions us into making your own canvas. It can cost more money to make your own canvases than it would to buy those pre-made cheapy value canvases. So if you are wanting to just do something on the cheap and be able to paint on a canvas, then the value pack canvases are still the clear winner over making it yourself, because you don't have to do all the effort of stretching and cutting the stretcher bars and all of this stuff, gessoing the canvas. You don't have to go through any of that stuff. It's already done for you. But let's look at one of the canvas rolls that I have here. It's pre-gesso. You can see this is a very big roll of canvas. I can't even fit it all in the frame of the video, but it is pre-gessoed. It is actually linen. It's not canvas. It looks like canvas. You can't really tell the difference between them here in the roll, but the difference between linen and canvas, at least from my perspective, I've never painted on linen myself because it's much more expensive than canvas is, and I'm always trying to save a little money, and I still like the quality of canvas, so it doesn't really matter to me. Other than being more expensive, linen has a little bit different tooth, so a little bit different texture than canvas does. You can see here that it is pre-gessoed. This part is ungessoed, and then this is where they applied the gesso, and it's very stiff. So if you are going to stretch something that's pre-gessoed, you better have really strong hands and wrists, because you have to be able to get this to bend and fold around stretcher bars. Now this video is not a tutorial on how to make your canvases from scratch. That would be a different video, but just to suffice it to say, there's plenty of resources on YouTube if you're trying to figure out how to stretch your own canvases. I don't do this. I can't do this. I have tendonitis in every joint in my upper extremities because I have a connective tissue disorder. So when I made a canvas, which I'm about to show you, my husband, Greg, he stretched it for me. He stretched several for me, actually. And he also has woodworking equipment like saws and stuff out in our garage, which also I don't know anything about how to explain to you what he did, but he cut up all the pieces of wood and built the stretcher bars and everything for me from scratch for this piece that I'm about to show you. So this is a painting I made of my cat, Mr. Samadhi, who's hanging out down here. I did want to show you a more detailed look at this. So you can see the back here. You can see, now this canvas did not come pre-gessoed. What we did was we went to Hobby Lobby and just got a roll of canvas. This is just the canvas that they carry in the fabric section that you just general use for sewing. So if you were going to make like a canvas tote bag or something, you would use this kind of canvas. Well, it's the same kind of canvas that I put on here. And I got some gesso, and then I just basically applied it to the canvas. If you are applying gesso to a canvas, you can just use a brush or a roller. Just put a bunch of coats on there, as many coats as you want to adjust the level of tooth, and you're ready to go. I had a lot of fun painting on this canvas. I was painting my cat, and it was cool to be able to paint on a canvas that was completely homemade, but it did take a lot of work. And this was a painting that I made about 8 years ago in my art career. Over the years, I've just gotten into the habit of purchasing my canvases, because although it is nice, the idea of making something completely yourself, and you can make custom sizes and things that you couldn't necessarily get online or in person at a store. But in general, like, you don't really need custom sizes anyway. It's better to have a size that the customer can frame easily if they want to frame it later, unless you are going to go to the expense before you sell it to a customer to be able to frame it and everything ahead of time, which some artists do. That's totally up to you. But I always try to think about having things that are standard sizes and easier for customers to deal with. And it also makes sense to have standard standard sizes if you are going to make prints of them later, and then you want people to be able to frame the prints easily. So oftentimes I use square canvases or canvases that are like 8 by 10, 16 by 20, something like that, because those will generate prints that will be easy for customers to frame. So I always have foresight in how I'm painting as a professional artist. Now, as a beginner artist, you might not need to really be thinking about those things. You might just be choosing a canvas to practice on. But I did just want to touch a little bit on choosing the right size of canvas also for prints and things like that later, because I know some of you are thinking about growing to become a professional artist at some point in the future. And so the artwork that you make now might be generating art prints and income for you in the future. So you have to kind of think about some of that stuff as well. I also want to make sure to touch on the fact that there are canvas sheets. You've probably seen pads of paper. I don't have one here to show you. I wish I did. But they have canvas sheets. They're pads of paper that are canvas. And basically you can paint on them, and then you can either let it dry and just like stack it up in a flat file or something to hold it and save it, and maybe frame it later if you would like to display it. That is an option, especially for practicing. Now, I would suggest not to do this though, because I did this in the beginning of my career. I created a whole bunch of work on those canvas pads of paper, and then it was so hard for me to figure out how to display them, and customers don't really want a painting that's framed with glass over it. I didn't leave enough room around the edges of the pieces that I created because they were small pieces of canvas paper, and so I didn't leave enough room around the edges to stretch them because it would have taken away the image. And just to make sure you understand, let me show you on this. You see there's the painting that I painted on the front, and then I also painted on the edges, and these edges are stretched around and stapled on the back. So if you paint on one of the canvas papers and you don't leave like 3 inches of border around it, you're not going to be able to stretch it around stretcher bars to display it later in the end. And so then you'll have to try to get it into a frame and mount it in there, and the canvas will kind of bubble up. It doesn't look very good from a display standpoint, and so then you have to put glass over it, and then people can't really even tell that it is a canvas painting, so you're selling it for the price that you would sell a print or something like that. And so it's not so good for your long-term career. So that's why I would lean away from using any of the canvas pads, and I would go straight to painting either on a panel or a value pack canvas for practice. And if you'd like to learn more about acrylic painting, I've made an entire playlist of over 30 videos that show you all sorts of really great tips and hacks on how to improve your painting skills. All right, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.